Hello, you're listening to A Hero's Welcome, Episode 9. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Wes, and with me, Andrew. How's Overwatch treating you, Andrew?
It's been really good. I've been having a lot of fun playing, and so is a lot of new players. We've just recently found out we have up to 10 million players enjoying this game, so been having a lot of fun, a lot of new faces, so it's been interesting.
Yeah, last time we heard it was 7 million, so it's a 3 million jump in maybe just a couple weeks or less.
I mean, it's been growing really rapidly, so, having a lot of fun with the game. Hope everybody else is enjoying it as well.
I've been having a blast despite being sick. Disclaimer, I'm going to sound even worse than I usually do. Getting over a cold, but show goes on.
Show must go on.
All right, so let's jump right into the news. We got our very first patch, like a legitimate patch.
Right, so our very first patch since launch. Main things to note, McCree getting a little bit of a nerf. His alt fire damage goes down from about 70 to 45 damage individually. It's about a 25 damage reduction. That's not including fall off and things like that as well. But they did actually reduce the recovery time for his right click, so you're able to do it a little bit more often. So it went down from about a 3/4 of a second down to about 0.3 of a second. So 0.45 second reduction on that.
Yeah, so pretty much the gist of it is McCree normally does 70 damage, and that's an ideal range because there's some fall off. So if it's far away, his bullets do less damage. So before, his bullets did the same amount of damage despite left click or right click fan to hammer. So fan to hammer damage got reduced, left click is the same, and it did get reduced by 25 damage, and they did compensate for that, making the animation, the reload animation for fan to hammer shorter.
Exactly.
So let's talk about this because it's pretty significant. In my opinion, I believe that right click is now unusable and it doesn't have a place in the game. There's no scenario that you could play out in any hypothetical, example where right click would be ideal. Left click is always going to do more damage, is always going to have more DPS, and you can't headshot with right click. When you stun someone, you have at least a guaranteed headshot with the left click, right?
Yeah, that doesn't sound right to me, though. You're able to, the recovery time has been reduced, so theoretically you should be able to unload shots faster using the right click, especially if you're rolling and such. So even including that, you're still going with the left click? Yes,
even though you are able to do more bullets per second because of the damage reduction, and like I said, the fact that you can't ever get headshots, which you should be aiming for the head with McCree being a hit scan character. There's never really a situation where right click, and I don't think that's where it ought to be. I think if you have an ability in the game, there should be opportunities to arise where those are beneficial to use. But the current state of the game with the current nerfs, it's pretty much you never right click in the game, and that's my only complaint about the whole patch.
Yeah, that seems really bad, in my understanding. You only have several abilities. To have one whole ability that's just completely useless, doesn't sound too good to me.
I can't think of any circumstance where right-clicking is better than left-clicking.
So now you're going to be using the flashbang with your left click instead of fan the hammer.
Right, because when someone's standing still, you left-click, get a headshot. It's a guarantee 140 damage. You know what I'm saying? When you start right-clicking, you're doing 45 damage, 45 damage, 45 damage. You're still not even at 170 or 140. I'm sorry. The flashbang does damage as well.
Exactly. So that would be.
A tracer or something, you just stun, headshot, she's dead.
Right. Okay. Well, I don't know. Maybe they'll fix that later. I hope they really do, because I definitely like fan the hammer idea. I definitely think that it should definitely be usable. That seems really poor.
Yeah, I think when you have abilities, it should be in a place where there's circumstances to use both. But I think the change is good, not being able to kill tanks so quickly. I'm not trying to say, it's bad revert, but, maybe something else needs to be altered there. But overall, I do like the changes. Yeah.
Overall, yeah, I was pretty happy with the changes overall. I played a little bit of McCree. I still think he's very viable. He's a really strong character still. But yeah, so I was happy to see the changes. Hopefully they'll fix that later.
Yeah, and he's still getting played in competitive. He's fine. He's in a good place. The only argument is you kind of have a whole ability that is kind of useless at the moment. But that's enough of McCree. Let's get on Widowmaker. A couple changes, right? So before you're able to cancel the unscope animation with right-clicking twice, and that kind of gave you a couple different benefits, so they took that out. Also, it's a little bit harder to charge your ult.
Right, so a 10% increase on the cost of your ult, so you'll see that up a little less often. I think in the developer note they noted that it was coming up a little too often, and it's such a strong ability across the team that it benefits that they really felt like it was just too often. With the unscoping animation, you actually got your charge a little bit quicker if you unscope and then rescope. So we were seeing a lot of the high-skilled players using that to their advantage.
Right, and you're able to move faster when you're unscoped.
You're able to have a lot
and
more
you
awareness.
Have much more awareness because your view.
Right. So, I mean, ultimately, I really like the changes that they made with Widowmaker as well. I think the increase to her ult cost is really good across the board. And although I enjoyed the unscoping as kind of a little kind of tidbit trick to help boost your play on the character, I see where they were going with that. So I'm glad to see that they made changes to that.
I like having little tricks like that, like Genji having a combination of, right click, melee, shift, like having those niche things that do cancel animations and kind of give you a little edge, like little niche ways to play classes. Those are cool, but Widowmaker plays more like a sniper now, I would argue. And obviously the biggest change we haven't mentioned is the reduction in damage to body shots.
Right, which we've been talking about in the past, specifically with other characters like
I must say
Zenyatta.
I predicted these changes exactly perfect.
Right, we did.
If you go back
several episodes ago, you did kind of nailed the.
I said specifically body shot reduction and Phantom Hammer reduction.
Exactly, and I mean it's obvious to see why they did it. I'm very happy, especially with the Widowmaker changes to the body shots. So I will get to play a lot more Zenyatta. Happy about that. I haven't been playing a lot of Zenyatta lately, but definitely one of my favorite healers. So looking forward to that. So they did reduce the base damage, but they increased the headshot multiplier from 2 times to 2.5 times. So it is the exact same 300 damage for critical headshot.
Right, so the way it works now is it's more in line with Hanzo. So if you play Hanzo, the body shots will do 120 instead of 150, and the headshots are still at 300. So you still have the same headshot damage, but it incentivizes better play. And just getting those body shot, you have a lot of body shot heroes, and they're a little too strong.
Definitely. So across the board, we think the patch has been really good. Looking forward to playing more games and kind of figuring all this stuff out. But I'm really impressed so far with the changes that they've made.
And there's one other little change about boosting Mercy's ult by attacking walls. But that was just kind of like a little exploit. Just wasn't working as intended, but
right.
A little fix there.
So they changed that. And they also noted in the general of the patch that they did improve the stability of the high bandwidth option in the custom games slightly. So it's definitely something I wanted to check out. We'll see how that works out. But I was having issues with that in the past. So we'll see how well that works now.
Yeah, I tried it out a few times, and I never had problems. But, they have come out and said, where people talking about having ping problems or other problems in the game.
Yeah,
and they've implemented these systems into custom games, but people aren't trying them. So they're trying to implement a new system and get feedback, but no one's using it, right?
Right. So hopefully with the improved stability, because a lot of people were complaining that they were having an issue with the stability of even being able to load in. That's why they weren't able to test it out. So hopefully that will work out, and a lot more feedback will come in, and we'll see how that works out.
Right, and we're talking about tick rate, which is, something you might have heard about in Overwatch.
I'm sure, yeah. It's
community.
been all over the community so far. So,
but pretty much they're trying to say, we have the system in custom match, but 0.0, 6% of people using custom games are using this option, but they've made some improvements, and hopefully, I think the ideal is, bringing that to the normal, competitive and quick play.
Right. So hopefully we're looking forward to that, and hopefully we'll get some feedback. Speaking of which, next up, Jeff kind of talked in depth about the future of Overwatch and where we're going from here. So jumping right into that, they did talk about future content patches throughout this year and throughout the year into 2017. So we're definitely looking forward to more updates and more patches, little things here and there. They did talk about briefly when they launched, they were trying to maintain the stability of the launch, and so we weren't seeing a lot of content patches, and now we're kind of through that, and so we're into the phase of where we're going to see a lot more content patches soon.
Correct. So this conversation happened on the official forums, and it was a pretty lengthy post, probably the longest blue post I've ever read, really. But someone was concerned about the future of the game, what's kind of in store, what's the roadmap look like. So, Kaplan reiterated some things we already knew, some things he said in the past, but they're past the launch phase. Everything launched well. they're able to probably update the game more often, maybe do some little balance changes here more frequently, not too frequently, not.
Yeah, they talked about
Making
trying
it
to
too
strike
bad,
that
but-
balance between, keeping things up to date and, changing little things here in their balances, but not trying to break the game too much and provide too many changes in there.
Right, and he stressed a lot the competitive play being very far along and how the entire team is working on that one feature. Like primarily, they're all working together to get this competitive play. He did mention again that their target, date is going to be this month. It's pretty, we're more than halfway through the month, so a week and a half.
Wait for that. I'm super excited about that. We talked about it in the past. That's really where it is for us, and we're just so ready for that to come out.
He also mentioned the possibility of maybe having like a public test run, which people play other Blizzard games are familiar with this, but before it goes live, there's a whole nother realm or space dedicated towards testing features before they go live.
Exactly. So looking forward to that. They did mention that, so hopefully we will see that in the future. It'd be interesting to see how that works out. So they did also talk about some new heroes, and they did mention specifically that some that are really far along already, and some are just getting started. So hopefully with the next couple of patches or so, we'll see some new characters. Interesting to see, where they're going with that, what kind of roadmap they're going to take as far as the new heroes. So we'll see, maybe we'll have one or two. I think they mentioned in the past kind of their ideas to kind of drip feed them in slowly so as not to mess with the game too much. So
yeah, I think the expectation is they're always going to be designing new characters, multiple at a time. They probably should have a couple further along the pipeline ready to be released pretty regularly, but they're probably sitting on a couple people right now, pretty much ready to go.
Right, and they did talk about that as far as the heroes and even into the maps, that they're constantly working on new heroes and new maps, and they're constantly finding things that work, things that don't work. They're scrapping things altogether, so they're constantly ahead of the curve working on multiple things at once. They're doing a lot of internal testing before getting ready to release these things to us. So with that in mind, they are actually talking about new maps as well. They mentioned one of them that is officially in the production pipeline. So hopefully we will see that really soon here in the future.
Yes, correct. And improvements, the spectator feature is something that we hear a lot about, and he mentioned that again.
Yeah, they talked about that a lot in the past. He did kind of mention that is kind of leading more into the future. They're not sure exactly how quickly they will get to that. They did mention that they're kind of more focused on the highlights and the play of the game first and foremost, and then they're kind of move into the spectator feature and the broadcast observer and all that. So that will probably be sometime in the future, but they're definitely looking forward to that and looking into making some changes on that as well.
And he talked a little bit about brawls and custom games and different types of features that they can implement in that space. I hear a lot of people ask like, "Oh, this brawl is very good. It should always exist in the game."
Right. So they're always they're really using the brawl and custom games specifically to find different ways to play the game in different modes. They talked about in the past that modes are really the funnest part of the game for the developers to really design. So brawl is a perfect way for them to find new ways to play the game. With that, they're also talking about researching. So they're kind of in the research phase. It's not very far along. We don't know when we'll be seeing that. It's probably far off in the future, but they are researching what a server browser type feature would look like for the brawls and the custom games as well.
And we know Blizzard to be very good with making good social features, guilds, clans, and such, and those would work pretty good in this game. Being able to communicate probably multiple lobbies and get, find people to play the game with, it's going to, make a better environment for everybody to play in.
Right. So they've been talking about that all along, about making more social features in the game and the things like that as well. As far as we mentioned, like the ping system, adding a ping system to the game, which they said that they actually had in the past and kind of took out of the game. So things like that they're looking into, as well as, some more of the progression system. And, of course, the common bugs and things fixing that as well.
Right, so moving on, one of my favorite things to see are new developer updates, which are pretty candid videos of usually Kaplan. And he just talks pretty candidly about the game and what's on his mind, the direction, what's new.
I love these developer updates. I've had such a lot of fun listening to what they have to say and kind of getting to pick their brain and kind of find out exactly where they're going and how they're figuring these things out. I love that they do this. I think it's a perfect platform them to kind of reach the community and explain to us what they're thinking. So
Yeah, Jeff Kaplan's a total likable dude.
I mean,
No complaints.
yeah, we couldn't ask for a better spokesperson for this game for sure.
Right, so he talked about a lot of different things. The vast majority of it was about competitive play, which is what he said, what we talked about earlier, the vast, focus. The majority of the people on the team are focusing on working on that.
Right. So, like we mentioned, they did kind of give us a soft deadline of the end of this month. So, hopefully they'll stick to that. It seems pretty solid at this point. So, they're really focusing wholeheartedly on that feature in the game right now. So, they did mention some of the changes from the critical feedback from the past when they had a ranked play in the beta. So one of the main changes that they talked about that they got feedback was the actual season length. Originally it was 1 month, and so they've made the change. It's going to be more of a 3-month season. It's going to be based off of the actual seasons in the northern hemisphere. So you're going to have summer, winter, fall, those kind of things. And so far they said it's going to be kicked off this summer.
Yes, he talked about sudden death. He's mentioned this in the past, but a lot of this is in response to the tests and the data they got in the beta. It was only a short amount of time, but a lot of the games were going to sudden death, and he gave us a number: 35% of the time, the games went to sudden death, which pretty much just threw you in a random capture point map, and whoever won that won, all the goodies.
Right. So they did talk about that as one of the things they looked at. Definitely, they wanted to reduce the amount of percent that is actually happening, so they are making changes to that. They didn't go into too much depth of how they're going to be doing that, but I feel confident that they can tackle this issue pretty well. But it's one of the things I think we wanted to really touch on because there's kind of some misnomer about this out there with the sudden death and how often this was actually happening. Some people were saying it was happening 50% of the time. They did actually look at the statistics. It was about 35% of the times.
Which they admitted that it was much higher than they want it to be. And I want to make a very important note here. This data that they have, they obtained at the end of the beta, right? They had a little competitive play.
Right. Exactly.
And the 35% of the games we learned went to sudden death, but you have to understand that was in a space with very poor matchmaking, just because, it only existed for, a couple weeks and everybody was doing it. It's a brand new feature. So you had tons of lopsided games. I mean, by nature, because everyone just got thrown in there, right? So that 35% sudden death is, alarming because
it's actually very
the
underrated.
games were always very lopsided,
right?
And 35% of very lopsided games went to
right. So the more we bring those matches closer together with the better matchmaking, the more theoretically we would see that happening. So again, those numbers are really kind of underappreciated in that sense.
Yeah, I just really hope they have a system where if one team gets further with the payload than the other, then they win.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm sure they will tackle that as well, and we're looking forward to seeing what they do with that. They did also mention with sudden death that they actually have kind of worked in a way of resolving the sudden deaths on that match type. They did mention that they're going to have more information on that coming soon. We don't know how soon, but I'm hoping that it will be fun. I mean, I really like sudden death. I know it was happening really often, but I'm hoping that it stays really fun even on the map type. So
yeah, I like the idea of sudden death when it should be occurring, probably less than 10% of overall games. But it's kind of cool to think, if you're on Route 66 and somehow there's a tie in whatever system they have, you're going to resolve that tie on Route 66.
Right. So I'm super interested to see how they're going to do that on the actual map type. So
yeah, and he said he wanted the assault maps to last longer and a little bit more back and forth.
Right. So assault maps, they felt like the assault maps were kind of revolving all around only one or two major team fights, and then whoever lost those team fights was losing most of the time, and whoever was winning was kind of winning most of the time.
A little snowbally.
Right. So they kind of wanted to back that up a little bit and give more chance for back and forth. They really want to make the teams feel really close. They want to make it feel like there's a back and forth and that things are not one-sided.
And one thing that I was very highly anticipating hearing was this new MMR system and the skill rating system.
Definitely.
We don't know how everything works yet. More news to come soon. But we learned that there at the moment no tiers for ranking, so you don't have all those little diamonds in between tiers, right? Like
right,
advanced rank 3,
so
advanced
this is
rank
something
4.
that we've been waiting to hear for a long time. It's one of the things we touched on several times. So they're completely changing the way the competitive play is working. It's not going to be leagues. It's not going to be grouped up into silver, bronze, diamond, all that sort of gas. It's going to be specifically rankings, and you're going to have an actual what they're calling a skill rating that is going to directly correlate to your MMR rating. So it's definitely one of the things we talked about in the past, and I feel like a much better way of doing the system. There are pros and cons of each way, but as they got feedback from in the beta, people were feeling like it was kind of leaning much more towards the other way. And so
right, the vast majority of criticism was you're focusing too much on the journey and obtaining these ranks and not being able to go down and getting reset pretty often every month. So this is pretty much, way in the opposite direction. It's much more crude. It's going to show you this is what your skill rating is. You're going to be able to see it. You're going to be able to know. You're going to know everyone in your team skill rating when you're matchmaked, your enemy skill rating, the combination of your team's, skill rating compared to your enemies. You're even going to know who's going to be grouped up, so you can't say, oh man, did I go up against a 5-man pre-made? You'll know.
Right, so they're being much more transparent in their system and the way that competitively is going to work, which I feel is very awesome, and I hope they continue to kind of follow that through with everything. So everything's going to be very visible. You're going to see your skill rating, your team's average, parties, all that sort of stuff, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. The more and more I hear about competitive play, the more I just can't wait for it.
Correct, and he did mention a little bit about how you get skill points, how you move up and down, and how the underdog would have the possibility of getting a little bit more points and vice versa. If you lose, you wouldn't lose as much points. And people are familiar with ELO ranking systems, they use in traditional sports and pretty much all the ranked competitive games.
So a very common system. It's something that's used across the board on pretty much any sport where you're measuring a matchmaking system. So definitely can't wait for it. Looking forward to it.
And he talked a little bit about rewards. So he did mention, what you would expect, maybe some, profile pictures or some sprays. But he did mention some other rewards and some rewards that would be obtainable a little bit faster if you're, higher ranked character. He specifically said golden guns. So maybe, if you're playing Reinhardt, a big golden axe swinging around.
Yeah, he actually did mention Reinhardt specifically with the golden axe. So
what's a mace if you have his regular skin?
Right, mace.
Yeah, he has an axe on the one skin.
Yeah. So we'll see how that looks. But that sounds very interesting. I'll be really interested to see how that's going to look.
Yeah, so everyone's going to be racing to get the gold weapons first. And you did mention specifically that the high tier players will have their special rewards as well.
Right. They're going to receive them a lot faster as well. So definitely everything sounds really good so far. I'm really interested to see how everything turns out.
And we did actually get a response from the official Overwatch Twitter on our Twitter account at 2 Moon Studios. We'll have a link for it in the description or the comments, the show notes. But they were asking for our feedback, so we took the time to give them our feedback about the competitive play, specifically about the video.
Right. So we really took our time. We kind of wanted to make sure that it wasn't too long, and then we weren't kind of running on, but we wanted to cover all of the points that we were kind of concerned with, and we did mention, as we did here, all the changes that we were really interested in, we were really liking. So hopefully you guys may take a chance to read that. Like we said, it will be in the description or the show notes. You can find that, or you can go on our Twitter at 2 Moon Studios and really maybe even be a part of the conversation and join in and give us your input. Tell us what you think about that.
Yeah, so we kind of structured it by defining quality matches, because you could argue the most important thing with competitive play is having quality matches, which is every game both teams have an equal opportunity to win.
Right, so you really kind of have to start with the quality matches, because before you get into anything else, you have to make sure that that is being prioritized.
And there's things in the game that potentially sacrifice the quality of the game, like queue times comes up pretty often. You know, if you're waiting more than a couple of minutes, maybe it's going to sacrifice, putting you into a fair game. They're just going to throw you in the game and maybe more lopsided. And, we just made an argument on the forum about, there is other places, other modes in the game where you could just jump in and play very quickly. But when it comes to competitive play, people want a more serious atmosphere. You're going to probably dedicate more time to that. And we feel quality matches pretty much trump everything else.
Right. And when you're talking about competitive play as a whole, Kaplan did mention that everybody kind of has their own opinion on what they want competitive play to be, but we just really hope that that they really structure it around the people that competitive play is really tailored for, and not like some of the other modes like quick play.
Yeah, there was a developer update back in, I believe it was February, is an old dev update where Kaplan talks about, we're talking about now, competitive play and the difficulties of making competitive play. And there's a huge range of player base in the Overwatch community. Obviously, he made the analogy of baseball. You have everyone from the T-ball leagues all the way to the major leagues. And creating a system that's going to be fun for everybody and work for everybody is very difficult. And I believe, although the Overwatch community does have that huge range, T-ball to major league, there are there's several other modes that are more likened to the more casual players, which you would say maybe T-ballers, at different expectations of the game. So you have the brawls, you have the quick matches. Those are more likened to probably the T-ballers and what they expect out of the game. So when you're making a competitive system, it should be specifically tailored to those with higher expectations, for serious environment.
Right. And I want to really say that, again, with the developer updates, we're just so great to have this input from the devs and find out exactly where they're going and what they're thinking. And I really like that he actually brought that up and brought it to the centerfold of things, because then we kind of get an insight into how they're looking at making the competitive play. But again, we really feel that you're never going to be able to make everybody happy. So the point of it is to try and make sure that every mode really, that it's tailored to what it's really made for. So competitive play is not made for quick games. It's not made for people who just want to jump in and have fun. That's what quick play is for. So
or versus AI or brawl.
Right. So there are plenty of ways for players to play in this game, and we just hope that competitive play really stays competitive and true to its nature.
And another important thing we pointed out was solo queue. So Blizzard's, from what we know, definitely favors a dynamic queue system, meaning that everybody's in the same pool, no matter if they queue up by themselves or if you have 5 friends you grouped up with, 6 friends. No matter what group size you are, it's going to be one large pool of players, and within that pool, they'll try to make the best, possible matches. But I don't know what your opinion is specifically, but solo duo queue for one pool and then a 6-man separate pool seems to be the best option that I know of.
Right, and we talked at length about this before we did the post as well. And I know Kaplan mentioned several times they had started out by saying they want to try and go with a dynamic queue, but they weren't sure how that would work out. More recently in the developer updates, he did mention that they think they really got a handle on making that work. And hats off to them if they find a way to make it work. But honestly, I think we're both in agreement. We really prefer the separate queues for solo duo and a full team queue. I just feel like having everybody in a single pool makes it too easy for the matchmaking system to just put people together that shouldn't be together in that situation, and it just makes things really bad. By separating that out, eliminating the option or the possibility of putting a 5-man team with a one solo queue player eliminates that whole feeling of, for that one player, just ending up in a really bad situation.
Right, so dynamic queue hypothetically gives you the possibility of grouping with 5 friends, meaning you would have to have a solo queue on your team. And if it's fair, it'll probably put you up against another 5-man, maybe a 4-man and 2 solo queues. But the impact that one solo queue player is going to have on that team is diminished dramatically. And what you're going to see is whoever had the best pre-made going in is going to win.
Right.
So whoever's more organized.
Like, as if you're that one person in that solo situation, you feel like you're completely taken out of the game. You're not a part of the situation at all, and you're just kind of a bystander.
And you're going to know that knowledge before you even get into the game.
Yeah, which is really bad. I would prefer to know ahead of time. I'd hate to find out after the game too, but still that doesn't negate the fact that that's a really bad situation, and we would rather see that taken out of the possibility. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
I can see
think,
Blizzard coming back and saying, oh, it's really, really rare for this. This only happens 0.01% of times, but every single time someone group says 5, it's going to happen, right?
right. And the thing is I talked about in the post a little bit about the actual overall feeling of the matchmaking system. A lot of people don't know exactly how matchmaking works in the current system or any system. They go in, they queue for the game, they play games, and they just kind of infer the way things work. And unfortunately, without going in with the information and just kind of inferring things, I really feel like a lot of people can get a bad sense of how the matchmaking is working, even if it's very few times. 1 or 2 times you queue in for a night, you play 5 games, and you get one of those games in that really bad situation, and it just makes your whole experience really bad.
So you're saying that people's feelings aren't a good guide?
Definitely not a good guide for this situation. We don't, definitely you don't want to try and just infer how things are working. It's much more, much better to know what is actually going on, but still, players don't think of things that way. They're not going to take the time to try and figure it out. They're just going to dump on the whole system because they feel like one thing is messed up, and that's just the way they feel.
Yeah, and the last thing we talked about in good amount of detail is penalties. Penalties exist in the casual quick play. They will most likely appear in competitive. Obviously, we'd like to think that people are less likely to leave with the competitive play because that's a space dedicated to more serious play, but obviously would have to be some sort of penalties, and it would have to be harsh enough to actually deter people, whether it be just reduce their personal skill rating or force them in timeout and have to go play some versus AI games for an hour.
Right, and we talked about that in the post and linked about the penalty system. I just hope that, I know we talked about it, not just having reoccurring penalties or progressive penalties, but that it's quick enough that it's actually deterring people progressively and not actually just waiting until they abuse the system to put them in a timeout and such. So we'll see how that shapes up. I'm really interested for competitive play, and I hope they make a really good experience.
But yeah, we have a much more in-depth write-up on the official forums. We'll have a link on, to it in the show notes or the description, however you're getting this podcast. And we welcome you to be a part of the conversation. You probably are playing Overwatch if you're listening to this, and you could, be a part of that conversation on the official forums.
Yeah, we would love to have feedback. We'd love to hear your take on the matter, and we'd love to just have you a part of the conversation. So hopefully we'll see you there.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about competitive. We talked a little bit in the past how there's weekly tournaments going on every week. There's always something to watch. I caught a really cool game today with a full Chinese team I've never seen before. Something new hit the scene during the Gosu Weekly, the NA, and it's pretty fun. Just want to congratulate a few teams for winning.
Definitely. So, if you haven't been paying attention, Envious has pretty much been dominating things thus far. They just did, again, defend their King of the Watch title. If you watch that, this is the 3rd week in a row. The most recent was against Melty Esports. And, they've just been doing an amazing job just being a really great team unit and just working flawlessly.
Yeah, and today, just ended a few hours ago, the Gosu Weekly NA. Congrats to Luminosity LG for taking that win. A lot of the higher end teams weren't present in that particular tournament, but it was definitely there's a win. And it's you see new players all the time. These tournaments are awesome. Like I said, there's a team 100% Chinese players from China, and they made it into the semifinals. That's pretty good.
Right. Brand new team. They came in. They really showed up. I think they did a great job, and hopefully we'll see more of them in the future.
And by the way, I think their name is One Sun.
One Sun. So it's all Chinese teams, new team. Check it out. Watch them. I had a lot of fun watching that. And, of course, Envious, Luminosity Gaming, always great teams to watch out for. Again, I think we mentioned this in previous show before, but there has been such an influx of information, especially with developer updates, with the new competitive play on the way, that we've been spending so much time covering all of these news and updates that we really have not had a whole lot of time to cover a lot of the competitive. Like we mentioned, there's so much going on in the competitive scene. We see new games every week. So we'd really like to get your feedback if you guys are interested in hearing more about the esports in particular. Maybe we might dedicate an entire show to esports.
Yeah, it's just hard to cover in depth, especially with so much tournaments. And in this show we talk about strategy, we talk about news. It's really hard to go in depth. We could spend another hour or two talking about it. So if people are interested in just like a pure addition to esport or competitive sort of, podcast, let us know.
Yeah, so you can message us at heroeswelcomepodcast@gmail.com, or you can find us on Twitter at 2 Moon Studios. Let us know.
So let's talk about strategy. Our strategy segment today is going to be all about Zarya. She happens to be my highest win rate character of them all. It's like 67%. And I played a good amount of games. It's like 40, maybe even 50 games on her.
Right, so we mentioned last week that we would be covering Zarya, and as usual, I've been playing a lot of Zarya, but I knew you were going to have a lot of fun with this because you play a ton of Zarya, and you're doing pretty good with her so far. Like you said, it's your highest win rate character, so we'll jump right in. So Zarya is a tank. She does have 400 total health, 200 of which is shield, so you have 200 health, and you also have 200 shield baseline in the character's health.
Right, so we went in detail about shields in the previous episode, but pretty much shield's better than health because it regenerates over time.
Right.
And it works very well with her kit, which we'll talk about with shields and things. So you could take half of your entire health bar, you have shields on top of that, and if you're able to just exit combat, you don't have to get a health pack. All that's going to regenerate.
Right, so keep an eye on that. I mean, you definitely don't want to be taking health packs away from people like your Tracer and the such. So you do have the 200 shields. It really plays into her kit and how she plays as a character. So we're going to talk about that later, definitely. So keep an eye on that for sure.
Yes, so her weapon is called the Particle Cannon. You're probably pretty familiar with what it looks like. Looks pretty heavy.
Definitely looks really heavy, but she looks like she carries it pretty well.
She can muscle it around. Her left click is just a particle beam. It's a 15-meter long beam that shoots out. So her weapon has 100 ammunition, and it's both the primary and alternate, ability, right? You can left click or right click. So
right.
Left click's a beam. It's 20 rounds per second, right? So every second you're going to consume 20 of your 100 ammunition. It does damage that relates to the charge. So she has a special sort of feature where you're able to charge your weapons. How does that work?
Right, so you're actually able to use her other abilities, her shields and barriers, to actually charge up your weapon. So it starts out at 0 and it goes all the way up to 100. And she is really a really interesting character in that manner because she kind of goes from being really weak damage, probably one of the least damage characters in the game, to being one of the strongest at full charge. So you definitely got to watch out for that. She has little cues here and there that can give you an idea if you're playing her or playing against her, where her charge rating is. Obviously, if you're playing her, she does have that value listed right near her reticle. You can see that charge 0 to 100. And also there are a couple other cues from the size of your crosshair grows and the actual reticle itself thickens. Then you're going to see things like a larger beam hit area. So interesting to note, it actually does increase the hit area. So you can actually change the hit area when you charge up her ability and other things as well.
Yeah, so gist of it is her left and right click do different damage depending on where her charge is, 0 to 100%.
Right, exactly. So definitely that's the core of how she works to really charge up her ability. Her right click, her alternate fire, is called an explosive charge. Again, you're using that 100 ammo baseline from her. So whether you're left clicking or right clicking, you have 100 ammo. And interesting with the right click, alternate fires, you're actually each right click you're using up 25 or a quarter of your ammunition total.
And I know you mentioned it, but just to be very clear, there's multiple ways to know where your charge is. So there is a value specifically 100%, 0 to 100%. There's a visual effect on your gun. There's a huge energy ball that grows, and you visually look different. Obviously, you don't see yourself when you're playing in first person, but when you see a Zarya that's kind of glowing, that means she's gonna
pretty big
hurt
cue
you
right there. Yeah, you got to watch out for that. She really starts to have this aura around her, and again, her beam on her left click actually gets bigger as well. So her right click, it is 1 round per second. It does about 46 to 95 DPS, all dependent on her charge as well.
So the way she works is she doesn't do very much damage unless she's got a high energy level, and you use your shields, which we're about to talk about, to boost your power level. So let's talk about what's default shift, the particle barrier. The cooldown's 10 seconds, and it automatically puts a shield on yourself. It absorbs 200 damage, and it lasts for 2 seconds, and it's a pretty good amount of damage. I mean, that's
I mean, that's a baseline of her 200 shield already, so you're granting an extra basic half of your health at that point.
It's pretty much like a standard entire health pool of a normal character.
Right, so you can really absorb a lot of damage that really, again, plays into how you play her as a character. And we're going to definitely talk in depth about that in the character discussion.
Yeah, but just the obvious thing is when you're expecting to receive incoming damage, you pop your shield. Obviously very good against turrets and things that are automatically going to fire at you. Or, projectiles that are mid-air like rockets from Pharah. Very easy to fish those.
Yeah, and they do a lot of damage, so you're going to receive a good amount of charge from that as well. And so her next ability, her E, is actually her projected barrier, which is the barrier that you put on your friendlies. So again, it is a 200 shield. Its cooldown is 8 seconds. It has a range of about 30 meters, so it's plenty long enough. You can reach all your friendlies and kind of put that shield on them. You can put it on one person at a time, and it does last 2 seconds.
So important things to note is the cooldown's a little bit less, 8 seconds, so you're able to shield your allies more frequently. And there was some changes with this ability in the beta, so some people still might, if they're not recent information, the shield amount is 200. Used to be more. You were able to shield more often as well, and it lasted longer too. The old shields, they lasted 4 seconds, but so all the Zarya shields last 2 seconds, whether it's on yourself or a friendly, and 200 damage is how much you're gonna absorb.
Right, so again, we mentioned that the cooldown on the projected barrier is lower than your self particle barrier. So very important the way she plays, because you really want to focus on making sure that you're putting that barrier, that projected barrier, on your friendlies, because that's probably the majority of the way that you're fishing your charge. You're going to have it up a lot more often, and obviously when you have frontline characters like a Genji or even a Pharah, when she's ulting, you can really fish that charge real easy with them.
Yeah, once you play a lot of her, you'll see opportunities just, blow up at you. When you see your Reinhardt charge their team, just shield him. You see Genji charge in. I'm seeing friendly get hooked by Roadhog.
Definitely good time to use that ability. I mean, you're pretty sure that as soon as that hook lands, incoming the left click.
Yeah, maybe your Mercy is rezzing your dead teammates. She's vulnerable.
Definitely.
But let's talk about ultimate before we get too much into discussion here. Her ultimate is very famous, very good setup. It's called Graviton Surge.
I know we had a lot of fun comboing this ability. There's just so many ways you can combo this ability. Such a great ability. It's one of the strongest ults I feel in the game. Very situational on how you can use it, but
it's very team based as well. You don't just want to pop it, not show out. Right. You got to have some people on your follow up with you.
Right. And there's definitely some things to note. Again, it is a 4-second duration, so you're going to lob a gravity bomb in the direction that you're aiming, and it's going to then draw in all the enemies around it. So it does do a little bit of damage, about 22 damage. It does have a range of 8 meters, and they're going to stay there for about 4 seconds of the duration.
Right. So I'm sure you've probably seen this before. It's a huge swirling ball of gravity, and it's going to suck everybody in towards it. That's the way it works.
Right.
Obviously the color schemes work the same on all the characters, right? So if it's red, it's an enemy. Blue, friendly.
Exactly. So it definitely easy to spot. It kind of takes up a huge portion. You can see it real easy, and obviously there's an audio cue from Zarya, whether you're team or you're the enemy. There's a few things to note. You really want to take heed of. There are certain ways to get out of or even kind of nullify the graviton surge. So of course, your pesky little tracers, they can blink out of it in some situations. Reinhardt's charge, Genji Swift Strike, Reaper's Wraith form, of course, nullifies its effect on him. And there are certain things like, obviously, Sound Barrier is a great counter to it. You have Transcendence, and even more importantly, you have Ice Wall and Defense Matrix that can completely negate the ability and keep it away from your teammates as well.
Right, so you're thinking about who you're catching in that. A lot of times you're going to want to get, for example, Mercy. If you have an enemy Mercy, you don't want your ultimate just to be completely thrown away because you just res everybody. So make sure you get that Mercy kill. It lasts for 4 seconds, and it's pretty good. It's pretty good. I mean, especially, my favorite is when you're attacking objectives, you just have to wipe the team once, and it's just a good setup, just the best setup ult in the game.
Right, so it's one of those things we talked about in the past with attackers having such an advantage because they only have to win a team fight really once, and then they're able to capture that point or push the payload to that situation. So It's really a great ability to use in conjunction with other teammates, and Hanzo is one of my favorite. I know we had fun using that combo with Hanzo's ult as well.
Yeah, because if there's an ice wall or a Winston barrier or a Reinhardt with the shield, all that doesn't really matter with the dragon.
Nope, dragon just goes right through and just swallows them up whole. So
right, so that's her whole kit. It works very well together. Let's talk a little bit about using her, all of her tools. First and foremost, rocket jumping does exist for Zarya, and there's some other characters that exist for as well. What rocket jumping allows you to do is kind of take advantage of knockback effects from, in Zarya's case, her right click, right? Because it's like a little...
Right, so it's interesting to know you actually can do self-inflicted damage. Of course, you have a huge shield on your character of 200 baseline plus your shield, so it's not really that much damage. It's not a big deal. So it allows you to really use the rocket jump to get to different areas.
Right, so you're able to get to places you normally wouldn't be able to get to, get advantage points that are beneficial for maybe a graviton surge.
Right, exactly. So it really allows you to get probably to a higher vantage point and able to see the whole fight kind of unfolding and get a perfect vantage point for that graviton surge or other situations.
Yeah, another point I wanted to make was when you're playing Zarya, you want to be very communicative with your team. Hopefully you're on voice chat. You're able to say, oh, I have my Zarya ult. Do you have a Mei to combo with it? You mentioned Hanzo, maybe even like a Diva ult. And you want to let your team know, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to use it right here. And because, especially if you don't have charge, so if you're at 100% charge, you could kind of solo ult and do tons of damage and kill a lot of people. But most cases, you're going to want some follow-up. You're going to want a Soldier 76. You want some, some carry in there picking off some people while they're in.
Right, vulnerable. But as we mentioned, it's such an easy ability to combo pretty much any character in the game, even just using regular abilities, Soldier just firing into the Graviton Surge, or even like a Junkrat just lobbing his grenades in there, can do such damage and devastate the whole team and just really wipe them. That you just don't want to miss an opportunity. You don't ever want to fire it randomly and just have your whole team not in the area or not helping you out at all. Definitely be vocal when you're using this ability.
Right. Speaking of Junkrat, she's a pretty good counter because he's always lobbing grenades, and it's very easy to fish energy power off that. Another important thing with Zarya and her ult is environmental kills. So environmental kills is usually when you knock someone off into a pit or something. But there's number of maps where this is possible, but you don't even have to kill players. What comes to mind is like well, right, on Ilios.
Yeah, it's a perfect example.
So you could grab some surge over the well, and you'll be able to grab some people in there, and they're just going to fall down to their death. The garden map on Lejing Tower is my favorite. And when they're coming across the bridge, they don't even see your graviton surge. It's on the other side of the wall, and they're all glued to it, and as soon as it's over, they're just falling down.
Right. So you definitely use it in some peculiar manners to really secure those kills, and you don't even have to be there. And
it looks really, really good.
It feels really bad to be against it. I know I had it happen a couple times to me. I didn't die in those situations. I don't think they were specifically aimed at doing that, but I did have a couple of times where I was glued to the wall for a good second there. Could have been very bad situation. But
and we talked a little bit about it when we covered the particle barrier and the projected barrier, but taking advantage of your shielding, because that's kind of what you do as Zarya. And Zarya does tons of damage when she's charged up. Even the 50-60% charged Zarya could just melt DPSs. She used to stand toe to toe.
Yeah,
and seeing opportunities, to win the shield yourself, win the shield allies, like we said, hook. When you see someone get hooked on your team by a Roadhog.
Yeah, it's really important to note that even myself, when I first came to the character, there are some misconceptions. Obviously, you see you have this tank character with a good amount of health, and then you see her abilities, her shields, and you kind of have this idea of, I want to preemptively put on these shields to protect myself as much as possible and keep them up as much as possible. But the one thing to note is that they only last for 2 seconds, and they do have a 10 and 8 second cooldown, so you really kind of have to worry about how you're using them. You don't want to put them up, because anybody who knows how they work, you're going to put them up preemptively, and they're just not going to shoot them or do any damage into it. 2 seconds later, they're down. You get no charge for that whatsoever. So really the best way to use it is to wait till either you or your teammate is taking direct damage, and then apply the shield to them or yourself, and then you're able to get that charge. Even if they notice it right away, you're still going to get some charge out of that.
And it works well with her, because half of her entire health essentially is shields, and you have your shields addition to that. So if you're taking damage, about half health, you shield yourself, and maybe your enemy disengages or you disengage, and you're good to go. I mean, you'll get full health in just a couple seconds.
Right, so that's kind of why her kit works that way, and you have that shield because you're able to kind of take a lot of damage before you really have to worry with her. Another thing to note is it's interesting how the shields work. We did talk about the shields, both your projector barrier on your friendlies and yourself is a 200 shield, so that's the max that they will consume is 200, and then they are depleted. But what's interesting to note is those shields don't just shield you for the 200, they actually absorb the damage incoming. So if you do have like an ult from, say, like a Pharah's not a good example, but
like a headshot
Widowmaker or something of that sort that does more than 200 damage, it's not going to deplete that 200 damage and then take the rest of it out to your health. It actually absorbs the whole of the amount of the damage. It will deplete the shield, but you won't take any damage. So it's really great to fish into ults, things like that, and really get a lot of charge out of it.
Yeah, a lot of people know that her ult is such a good setup for other ults or what have you, but her shields are extremely good for setting up ults as well. When you have a friendly Reaper ult, he's kind of vulnerable. Shielding him, shielding a Pharah that's ulting, you're able to get much more value, and you're doubling these, your friendly's life pool.
Right. Pharah is a perfect example because she is so vulnerable and she's so obvious. When she goes up, she flies up, justice frames from above, everybody's looking at her. They're either trying to get out of the way, or you have your McCree or what have you, Soldier 76 trying to take her out. And so it's real easy just for her to fly up, for you to put that barrier on her, and now you're fishing charge, and she's pretty safe in that shield.
Yeah, when it's high noon, you can protect
pretty much any alt situation you can definitely use it on. So
Right, so do you know who we're covering next week?
I am so waiting for next week because we are going to be talking all about Zenyatta, probably my favorite healer. I have not had a chance to play him in such a long time because of Widowmaker and other situations. He has such a low health pool, so I'm really looking forward to playing him. So I am going to jump right in and be playing such tons amount of Zenyatta.
My very first legendary skin was Ifrit Zenyatta.
Don't even mention it, man. I still don't have a legendary, especially a Zenyatta legendary. I love that skin so much.
I mean, I don't know if I believe you. What level are you about?
I don't even know. It's like I'm in the 40s now.
Andrew says he's never opened a legendary.
Opened a legendary, and he even mentioned that there could be legendary coin as well, or currency, and I'm pretty positive I have not opened any of those as well. So. Lots of epics, no legendaries. So, but join us next week. We're going to be talking all about Zenyatta. So if you want to hear about Zenyatta, it's going to be a good episode for you. Thanks again for listening, guys. See you next week. And any feedback you can give us, we'd love to have.
Just want to thank all the people who've reached out and contacted us, whether it's on Twitter, which you can find us at 2 Moon Studios, or through the email. And that's a Heroes Welcome Podcast at gmail.com. And those are going to be in the show notes or the description or however you're getting this feed. And That's going to be it. Have a good time playing Overwatch. Till next time.
All right. Till next time, guys.